The colonial period in this area was mostly defined by rivers. That's why Fairmont was originally here, Middletown before it was Fairmont. And Fairmont is on the highest navigable point on the river, the Monongahela River. And so that made it a very reasonable point for shipping and so on to come through here. Once the Industrial Revolution in about the 1850s or so really took off, it took off primarily around Pittsburgh. And so an enormous amount of steel and other sort of things were being produced. And the coal that was in this area then was in a very convenient location to move it to be used. And so what you had was an enormous potential for profit. And of course, as always with profit potential, there's people who step up to the plate and do what needs to be done. The isolated location of a lot of the mines in West Virginia gave the folks who had the control almost a feudal level of authority over the people in their small towns. There weren't a lot of other opportunities for employment. There wasn't a lot of mobility, and certainly the possibility of travel in those days was limited anyway. The railroads were few, and so they were able to exert an enormous amount of control over the production of this coal.
I really do believe, Fairmont having the B&O Railroad stem coming into the city was an important factor of why this house came to be. Bringing the product and the expertise here to town. The railroad coming into West Virginia, I think it's 1853 or so, but really this station here was a major hub for freight and also passengers, so I think it's an important facet of why we have such a wonderful structure here today.
Probably what makes it significant is that it was one of the largest homes, probably the largest home built in that era in Fairmont. It's an English Tudor style home. Mr. Watson had gathered information from Europe about in England, and he really wanted to do an English Tudor style home. And at that time there was not a lot of money here in the area, and so that makes it pretty significant. It was a big project that was undertaken at that time in this area.
There are a lot of folks here who, either because they remember working in the mines themselves or they have family stories passed down, this house has become the center of a lot of resentment. It symbolizes for them a lot of brutality, a lot of blood, sweat, and tears that their family put in over generations that they feel they got no access to. Even though it's been decades since a family member lived in this house, it still, to them, symbolizes every part of that oppression and that century of oppression.
What was it like growing up at Highgate? It was wonderful. I have a lot of childhood memories here. The one thing that I remember the most is that when my father would go hunting, my mom would say, "Oh, Joanna, why don't you have some friends over?" And none of my friends would want to stay here because we have a funeral home. They would be scared to death to stay here. But it always made for the best place for hide and go seek. If it was a rainy day, you could ride your bike in the basement. You could play hide and seek. You could, whatever you wanted to do, there were endless things to do here. I think I took it for granted until probably I was in high school, and some things started to happen with the property and with the family. But now I look back and I couldn't have asked for a better childhood.
You know, my role as a preservation architect is always kind of looking ahead. I mean, we document the past, we understand the past, we understand the materials that were put in a home like this, but truly the challenge is looking ahead. You know, what are the issues for the next 5, 10 years? And honestly, what are the main maintenance issues? I mean, this is a house that, you know, from an economic perspective, every year there's something. You know, there really is something. So that's the challenge with a house like this. And from a sustainability, and when we talk sustainability, we're talking about economic sustainability, social sustainability, and environmental sustainability. This is a major piece of the social environment of Fairmont. Truly, it is a recognizable cultural resource. And that's, you know, really one aspect that needs to be considered as people look ahead at, you know, preserving this place.
My concerns for Highgate is preservation. It's a beautiful building. A lot of people see it as just a building. It's my home. And I would like to see the historical preservation aspect. I would love to see the home preserved. I don't want to see it torn down and put a park here. My concern is the preservation, that it would live on. If we are not able to stay here and maintain the preservation, then I would like to see it in somebody's hands that would preserve it, not come in and, you know, tear up a lot of things and put in offices. But we've been very cautious of, there's not a whole lot of remodeling in this home. Yes, we might have taken out a sink or two, but those sinks are downstairs in storage and labeled with what rooms they came out of. Even as far as a light switch, you know, if the light switch has been replaced, it's put away and it's saved. Nothing that we have done has been to destroy the integrity of the home. It has been maintained to the best of our knowledge, you know, that we can handle.
I think Highgate needs to be preserved for the very reason that it's resented. All of that suffering is in this house. All of that labor is in this house. Everything that generations of miners worked for is represented by this house. It is a monument to their hard work. It's a monument to their dedication. It's a monument to their perseverance despite all of those conditions. It's no different than the Carnegies and the Frick's palaces in Pittsburgh, which have been very well preserved, and the folks there recognize that legacy. I think this needs to exist as a legacy for those miners.